to another episode of Live in the Vision. I'm your host, Chris Jacobson, and with me in the studio tonight is a friend of mine, the manager of Parker Hannafin, Shawn Brock. Thanks for being here, Shawn.
Great to be here, Chris.
So, if you could, tell our listeners a little bit about your background, how you came to be in Yankton as the plant manager out of Parker.
So, I've got a manufacturing background. I've been working in various different areas of manufacturing for, it's a little over 20 years now, I guess, but mostly operations and production management and engineering types of roles. Most of my career I was with a medical device company in central Nebraska, but moved around quite a bit, and throughout part of my career, kind of moved from an individual contributor role working in engineering and continuous improvement into some leadership roles, smaller leadership roles within that company. And then got to the point where I needed a little bit different challenge. It's, when you grow up in a company, you kind of get to know everybody and all of the processes and everything, and it's easy to sort of move the chess pieces around and get the things done that you need to get done. But as a leader, I got to the point where I needed a little different kind of a challenge, and so that led me to leave that company and to move to Parker Hannafin about 4 years ago now to be the site leader of this role, which was a really exciting change. It was a huge transition to go from an industry and an operation where you knew everything about the processes and the people and the all the connections and networking, and to a totally different team and a totally different industry, and it was a great leadership challenge.
That's fantastic. So, because I know a little bit about your previous work life, I'd love to get into some of the transition, the jobs that got you here. So if we could go way back, talk about the jobs that you did leading up to now being the plant manager.
Like all the way back to the,
if we could,
the very beginning. So my first full-time job was at a sanitation company in central Nebraska. I quit high school when I was about 17. When I left high school, of course I didn't have a job, had a pregnant girlfriend, and had to start providing for the people in my life. So very simple job, picking up trash in the local community, and from there went to a construction company, worked with an owner operator at a construction company for several years. While I was working for him, I started going to school because I knew that there was other things that I wanted to do with my life, and obviously I had to finish my GED in order to make that transition to get into college, to get into tech school.
Sure.
And at that point I started doing some work, or my education was focused on really architecture, because I was working in construction. That was about the only thing that I knew. And during that time I got my first job in manufacturing at the medical device company that I was telling you about, and I was really fascinated by the plant environment. I was amazed by the technology. I was amazed by the environment and the culture in the plant. I'd never been exposed to anything like that before. The fast-paced environment and the automation and all the technology associated with that. So that really excited me. At that point, I made some changes to my education and started focusing on engineering more than construction, and moved around into several different roles within that company. When I finished my tech degree at that plant, I was looking for a role in engineering, and they didn't have one at the time. So I left that job, moved to Kearney, Nebraska, where I worked for a company building automated machines. I was really very fascinated and very focused on the automation side of manufacture. So I spent a couple years with that company while I was continuing my education in getting a bachelor's degree I've always been a non-traditional student, so I've always worked full time while going to school, and finished my bachelor's degree. Left that company, went back to the medical device company, and,
Right.
and moved with my family to Wisconsin for a couple of years for a job opportunity there, and spent a couple years there working as their plant engineer, and then moved back to central Nebraska
Sure.
to Columbus to work there.
Yeah, when you mentioned the sense of obligation to provide for your family and then to be going to school in addition to that, like what would a typical day look like when you were doing all of this?
Yeah, those were some interesting times. So during the time that I was working on second shift in the medical device manufacturing plant, during those days, my normal day job, so to speak, was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. So I had all of my classes set up during the morning. I would get up in the morning, probably, 7 or 8 o'clock, and I would drive about 80 miles to go to college. I'd be in school all morning long and early into the afternoon, and then I would have to leave there. And I think it was another 85 or 90 miles from school to the plant that I worked at, and then I would work from 3 to 11 there, and then truck home at 11 o'clock at night to get back home, and then do it all over again the next day.
Wow.
So there was like 180 or 200 mile loop there that I did every day for probably about 2 years.
Yes. So 2 years of just kind of grinding the work life, school life, putting food on the table. That's really impressive. I feel like in our society too often we sell ourselves short on what we're capable of, like what you can get done in a 24-hour span of time. I just think I know there's a lot of people out there that would really like to be doing more or learning another skill or whatever it is, and they're just like, well, I get home at night and I'm out of gas. And I think there's another gear in there for people after dinner's over in those evening hours to really get stuff done.
Well, it's amazing what you can get done when you don't give yourself a choice, right? It's pretty easy to talk yourself out of a challenge if you
Right.
let that happen.
Yeah.
But if you've got the right kind of motivation, there's a lot of things that you can
Right.
get done.
Yeah, and there's nothing like the the need to provide and that sense of obligation to our family, but there must have been something in manufacturing that, like you said, got you excited, you were fascinated by it, that really made you like lean into studying it and kind of talk about your education, the specific stuff you did for engineering.
Like the specific kind of studies and those
Yeah.
types of things, or
Sure, or just what about it got you to want to pursue the entire? You did an associate's.
yeah. So I had a 2-year degree in basically it was like a mechanical design, like a CAD design kind of a field. I've always been really interested in machines and in higher technology. So I didn't think, I suppose when I was younger and when I was growing up, I didn't have any kind of, I didn't think I was going to get any opportunities to get that kind of exposure in, small town central Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started working in the manufacturing plant, I was shocked. It was, the kinds of things that were going on in that facility. It was like it could have just as easily been a space shuttle. It was amazing. So that got me really, really excited, and just very engaged around how to learn that field and
Right.
get good at it.
Right. And so you work these long days. I mean, I imagine there is a lot of sacrifice in that when you're commuting that far, driving that much. You were a young father at the time.
Mm-hmm.
How is the family dynamic in terms of? I mean, you've got to have a pretty supportive spouse to.
Yeah,
keep going and
absolutely. That's definitely critical, and we were lucky enough to, during much of that time, we lived close to our families, so we had a good support system at home.
Sure.
With grandparents that could babysit and things like that. But I wouldn't say that during that time anybody had it figured out.
Mm-hmm.
I remember having a conversation with my wife when I started school, when I started college, when we still lived in Ord, and it was so. Also, I started school. Oh, well, that's really great. So, tell me about the field and tell me about what you're doing. And it was, you can kind of see the gears turning and the lights going on. Like, I don't see how we're ever going to use this where we live now. So, what does that mean? And we didn't know, right? It was just we knew that we wanted to do more, and we wanted to provide a good life for our family, and I was interested in bettering myself and growing in my career, and I had no idea where it was going to go from there. And there's been a lot of doors that have opened along the way, and at no time was there ever a 20-year plan.